Hey everyone, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Tom Peters with us today. Tom is the author of 20 books. This is his latest amazing book, Tom Peters' Compact Guide to Excellence. Tom has been all about extreme humanism forever, and this book is the most beautifully laid out book that I've seen when it comes to humanism or anything else. Like, everything is wonderful, and the contents are great too. So Tom, first thing I want to say is congratulations on another great book.
Well, holy smoke. That's a great way to start, but I want to get the second word in, not the first. If you look at the dust jacket, you will see Tom Peters and Nancy Green. And Nancy is on everybody's list as one of the top 100 designers in the planet, and how I got lucky enough to work with her. I've been talking about design for 25 years, and now I kind of know what I was talking about. I mean, the look, the feel, the taste, the touch is the message as much as the words. And I think it's very cool, and I think she did an amazing job. And it's the first book that I wrote that I really like.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, the messages, as you said in the beginning, are about energy and so on and so forth. And as opposed to a lot of dry and dreary 11-point type, I think she's made it come to life. And what we've done, incidentally, is it is essentially a book of, 125 quotes. And the key relative to the past, and I'm not totally dissing myself, is you don't get a 2-line quote and then 600 words of Tom Peters commentary. All of the quotes are understandable by anybody who made it through the 3rd grade. And so the real prayer is that people will buy it, will talk with their colleagues about it, will sit around and talk about a single quote that turned them on. And that's really the goal.
Yeah, I definitely think that will happen. I was thinking as I was going through that. So first of all, to your point, right? Kudos to Nancy. The book is beautiful. I love the red, right? I mean, it's the signature Tom Peters red, which I totally love. But as I was looking through it, I'm like, each page could be an Instagram post. Like, each piece of that could be an Instagram post. It could be a LinkedIn post, could be a tweet, something like that. I thought that was great. And one of the things that you pull out, and you've said this before, is design is heart. Design is heart. And that's, you've said that for years, but that's not how a lot of organizations think, Tom. So when did you come to that realization that design is heart? And why do you think others don't embrace that like you do?
Well, A, it's a hard question. And B, we could go for 50 minutes and not even get a good start. It is contrary. I'm trained as a civil engineer, and that's not exactly an artistic field. In fact, we were trained to hate architects because they can design things that we can't build. And so, total warfare. That always happens for anybody who's tuned into architecture with Frank Gehry buildings, by the way. I guess I think I've got an answer. My office for 20 or so years was at 555 Hamilton Avenue, right in the middle of Palo Alto. And 2 blocks up the road from me was a small place, 8, 10 employees, and it was called David Kelly Design. And I don't know, we may have been having a beer or a coffee together on University Avenue, and we started talking about design, and David kind of opened up a whole new world to me. Now, the reason it's important for me to say David Kelly Design is because David then went on to found IDEO, and he is the man at IDEO. And I really hadn't appreciated it. And, I think in my first few books, which wasn't all that bad that I talked about design, I said, the reason I love design is I like terrific things instead of shitty things. And you know, first of all, which is incredibly important to anybody who is watching us, design is not something for Apple Computer and the Grand Hotel. It holds as much in a 4-table restaurant or more than it does for a giant firm. It is what you said that we said. It's the heart, it's the soul, it's what turns you on. And incidentally, my co-author Nancy Green was the one who came up with extreme humanism. And I guess it's obvious. One of the other enormous points, and this is kind of the wrong way of saying it, it's the best defense against artificial intelligence. Here's a funny thing. I have a little heart irregularity, started about 20 years ago, and I have a pacemaker, and you upload your pacemaker to the doctor's office every couple of months. I have a little box that comes from Medtronics, and boy, I wish I could do this right. I wish I was holding it in my hand. It is the single best designed tool I have ever seen. You know, I'm used to stuff, particularly medical world anywhere, that's complicated and so on. First of all, and I should have brought it. First of all, it's beautiful. Second of all, I have an icon on my iPad. I push the icon, and the icon says, put your pacemaker up here next to your chest. And then it says, here we go. And then 90 seconds later, it says, we're done. And, about 3 hand movements, there's no way to F it up. I mean, of course there is. If it drops off, of course there is. And I just, put a couple batteries in the thing because I haven't used it for 6 months and turn it on. And but what it does, it doesn't make me love Medtronics. It makes me royally pissed off at 90% of other people. Here's an example, very personal. I am not quite as young as I used to. And when you get to be an old fart, you don't really have to be that old, you get a little bit arthritic. And, sometimes I have trouble with things like collar buttons. Well, we don't need them. We could have snaps. And a few things I have snaps. Now, that might sound tacky, but if you designed this, one of them guys, right, it would be just as pretty as any zipper or more so. But, and then the point, which is something I've been writing about. So you say, who the hell cares what Tom Peters thinks about, getting his shirt put together? And the answer is the biggest effing market in the United States of America, parentheses, developed world, is old farts, male old farts, female old farts. The numbers are staggering. And yet, which is being a little cheap because it's not true everywhere, the average design team is a bunch of 27-year-old MIT and Stanford graduates who couldn't spell the word art if you spotted them the first 2 letters. And that's totally unfair. And any of you like that who are watching, I'm sorry. But I am pissed off that everything is designed poorly when it could be designed terrifically. So it's, the other thing is, in my Palo Alto youth in the mid 80s, I worked for a while with some guy, I can't remember his name now. His first name was Steve, and I think it was something like Task or Job, maybe it was Steve Jobs, some name like that. And how did Steve get his inspiration? He got his inspiration because he took design courses. He got his inspiration because he went off unknown to other people for 2 weeks to sit in tea rooms in Japan. And the most wonderful thing, when Steve passed away, and I read this 3 or 4 places, they said Steve Jobs was not an inventor, and please, all of you, do me the favor of listening clearly. He was not an inventor. He was a tinkerer. He took something that was pretty good or not so good, and he changed it 80 million times until he had magic. You know, his wife, Lorene Powell Jobs, who's quoted in my book, Lorene Powell Jobs said Johnny Ive was the head designer at Apple, and she said Steve and Johnny would sit for hours talking about corners, corners, and you know, that's kind of the point. So yeah, I've gone hook, line, and sinker for design. I think it is the best differentiator of everything from the, you know, whatever. And you know, I think if we had a software designer here, absolutely the same thing is true about code. Code has the opportunity to be, you know, as beautiful as Monet or real shit. And, you know, it's funny. This is kind of an example of that. I have a friend, old fart like me, who was the head of the Harvard math department. He won the Field Prize, which is the Nobel for mathematics. And he was talking about it, and then I read up on it. Okay, Phil, you've got a conundrum that you want to solve as your PhD thesis. You spend 4 years and you solve it. And oh my God, the day comes, and we'll make it paper just for that, as opposed to electronics. And you hand in your thesis, and 2 weeks later, you get a call or walk in back from the department head, and he said, nice try, not good enough. And not good enough in their language, and this is the language others use, I didn't invent it, your proof was not beautiful. Because when you get to the tippy top of management, you are talking about abstractions, and words like beauty are the sort that you're looking at. And so if beauty in a mathematical proof is possible and wonderful, it's also equally possible, comma, damn it, comma, in 500 500 lines of code.
So why don't more embrace that though, Tom? That seems obvious, right? To me, when you say it out loud like that. I mean, the difference between even your book, right? I mean, this is a beautifully designed book. We take back to the first book that you had. It's still very nice, but it's sure not this. So why don't people embrace that? I mean, over the last 40 years, you've been writing books and you've come to embrace it. Why don't others?
Well, the proof of the pudding, and I hate to say this, and hopefully nobody from them is watching. This is my 20th book, and only one of them, Reimagine, came close to being a beautiful book. The others are functional, they're done well, they've got reasonably decent color, but they don't pop out in your face. And so I guess I don't know. At some level, which is not really a good answer, it's my problem with MBAs versus human beings. And it's liberal arts grads versus whatever. If you want great designers, you want to work with the IDEOs, or for your middle-sized company, a small design shop, and you want to do something to get it into your team's vocabulary. Don't have shit furniture in your office, excuse my language. Your office it doesn't have to be some extraordinary thing that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and it doesn't have to be over the top beauty, but you should get a real holy shit out of it when you walk into the office. And I never paid enough attention to that. I'm well aware of that in my own offices, which are mainly in Palo Alto. They were very functional, but they would sure as heck not inspire you. I don't know. Your question is wonderful. You know, study it a little bit. Talk to designers. I don't. I mean, the fundamental thing, and you can probably somehow get this into an interview. Do people like cool stuff? Or are they willing to put up with crap? From the Kleenex box to the snaps on the shirt, it's universal. It affects every corner of everything, and it is true. And I've talked to people even in things like mechanical engineering. Beauty is as true. I don't even think we have carburetors anymore. Beauty is as true, or was as true, in a carburetor as it is in an iPhone.
Yeah, but well, it makes sense, right? The more you say it, the more it makes sense, and I'm glad to see you beat on that. But that's with that, right? You've got this. You've also, I don't know, maybe added on, snapped on, if you will, the idea of being a business romantic in the book, which I thought was really cool. Like I hadn't read that idea before. So talk to me about that, Tom, being a business romantic.
Well, I can't talk about it very much because my memory isn't that good. Tim Lieberecht is the one who wrote the book. And I wish I had a copy in my hand because the subtitle is absolutely positively beautiful.
Fall Back in Love with Your Work and Your Life was the subtitle, Tom.
Okay, read it slowly, please.
Sure. Fall Back in Love with Your Work and Your Life. Is that the one? Or is it the give everything, quantify nothing, and create something greater than yourself?
It's the second one, but I'll take both of them. Thank you very much. Well done on that first one. And Tim, there's one of the big design companies, I don't even know whether they're still alive, was Frog Design. And he was a senior person at Frog Design. So he comes at stuff, with that bias. And again, to emphasize something I said a couple minutes ago, and it's, again, proof in the pudding, if you ask me, that you can have this sexy stuff, fabulous, sorry, sexy is the wrong word. That's not the point. Inspiring, moving stuff in software, as well as, you know, the fender of an automobile. Yeah, people ought to check out the book. And as I said, I went gaga over the whole thing. And Tim's a great guy.
Cool. So
I'd like you to read my book, but for sure read his book.
There you go. That'll be the second book that we recommend in today's conversation, Tom, for sure. Yeah, Tim Lieberecht, good stuff. So with that, right, we talked a lot about design there. So let's talk about people. Your last book was about extreme humanism, and this book is too. So, Tom, can you define what the heck extreme humanism is? Because that's kind of a big word for some, or two big words, I guess, for people: extreme and humanism.
Yeah. I want to start with something I'd rather not start with. I live in Greater Boston now, and I said to somebody, so God knows why, but the coach of the Patriots, Bill Belichick, calls me and says, look, I know your work, and I just want you to do an assessment of the team. And so I spend months doing the assessment, and then I sit down with Coach Belichick, and I look him in the eye, and I said, I've really learned some important stuff, one of which is your players are really very important. And so he grabs a Super Bowl trophy and whacks me over the head with it, and I'm out of here. If players are important to a football team or a symphony orchestra, they are the drivers. They are equally important to the software company, the car dealership, again, that 3-table restaurant. I mean, why the hell do I have to spend my life, particularly now that I'm an old fart, saying people are important? I have a little section in there where I say, training is should be our number one capital expense. And I say, I'm not going to read it to you. If you don't believe me, ask a symphony conductor, ask a movie director, ask an archery coach, ask the director of a nuclear power plant. And, so why not your joint? So it's really I've said it, and now this one I really want people to listen to me, and it's not just because I'm a relatively old fellow. I've said leading/managing is the highest human aspiration. And the reason for that is that your only true measure of success is the growth and the development of the people who have worked for you over the last 30 years or 2 years. That's your legacy. And by the way, all the research says it's the best damn way in the world to get growth and profitability over the mid to long term. But the funny thing about this, I said that, I believe it. And I was giving a long seminar in Mumbai, I don't know, 5 years ago, 8 years ago. And sitting in the front row was an Army general in uniform. And I was in the Navy for 4 years, and I graduated as a junior officer. So when I see a general of anything, I pull my chest out and salute. And we got talking kind of about people and development. And I want all of our good colleagues out there to listen carefully. I'm trying to, he's the general. I'm trying to decide whether Phil or Tom should be the next promotion to general. There's only one thing I do. I find and seek out the people who have worked for them over the last 20 years and see the degree to which those people grew because of the 2 years that they spent with Phil or the 18 months that they spent with Tom. And, I'd love to make a tape of that last 45 seconds and, play it over and over and over again. It's, I don't know what else to say. And I want to talk about EQ and some other things as well that are associated with it. But the major point is you're the people you helped grow as much as a fourth grade teacher. And the fourth grade teacher in today's world is already teaching coding. So I'm not talking about anything simplistic. That's and as I said to somebody one time, I said, I have an ideal job. And my ideal job is to be the head of a 53-person housekeeping department, whatever that would mean, 200-room hotel. And I chose 53, and this was a few years ago, the number might have changed, because the active duty roster of a National Football League team was 53 players. And I go up to these 52 housekeepers on the first day, and we can guess what their backgrounds are. A lot of them have come from tough places and so on. And I say to them, we are 53 human beings trying to do a fabulous job, and there is absolutely, positively zero difference between a 53-person housekeeping department and a 53-person National Football League. It is the whole excellence thing, which I've written about earlier, is where did excellence come from and in search of excellence? Well, it's a longer story, but the center of it was I was at McKinsey back when they were good guys. I was out back at McKinsey, and on short notice had to give a presentation. And I really had less than 24 hours, but my wife was irritated that I never showed up for the things I was supposed to. And so I took a deep breath and went to see the San Francisco Ballet with her. And so 2 hours later at midnight, I'm working on this presentation and trying to figure out a title. And this may sound simplistic, and it may be simplistic, but I really believe it's the essence of it. And I said to myself, holy smokes, we use words like excellence with a symphony, with a football team. Why can't we use it with a business? A symphony or a football team is simply a collection of human beings trying to do something, hopefully in an extraordinary fashion. No difference. And that's resonated with a lot of people. But my standard for my 52-person hotel team is the same standard that the director has for the San Francisco Ballet's players.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, right, we're always looking for it, right? Your first book was In Search of Excellence. Are we ever going to find it, Tom? Do we find it eventually,
one really
or is it a
important
journey?
thing I always have to say, and I'm sure you agree with me, people have called me and others like me a management guru, which was a horrible term invented by The Economist magazine. And if there is a class of gurus, my bet, and I'm part of the problem, is if you went through our books, I think this is kind of unfair, but I'm going to say it anyway, 75% of what we write about are big companies, like Fortune 500 companies. And yet in America, and I'm sure the numbers are just about exactly the same everywhere else, 7% of the American workforce works for the Fortune 500, 93% doesn't. And so I, in the last 10 or 15 years, trying to do penance, have fallen in love with the SMEs, the small and the medium-sized enterprises. Yes, the 2-person enterprises, but also the 25-person ones, the 50-persons, the 75-persons. I don't know where you want to make the cutoff, but relative to your initial question, there's a lot of excellence out there. We just don't find it in the Fortune 500 or the FTSE 100, because all the hard-nosed economic research says giant companies are in decline, period. It's just a question of how fast. And so I want to say to my fellow gurus, God, have we been screwing up for the last 30 years? But, and there are models. I did in my 2 books ago a big piece on a company called Basement Systems, Inc. from Seymour, Connecticut. What is their magic? They take your moldy, bum old basement, they dry it out, they clean it out, they turn it into an extra bedroom in your smallish house, they turn it into a family room, and make it something that's a centerpiece. And by doing these things, they've grown to be the $100 million basement company. And so you can do it with all this super sexy stuff, but damn it, you can do it just as well with basements.
That's encouraging. And that's excellence. That's what we can strive for. So you said you want to talk a little bit about EQ, Tom.
What?
About EQ.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. Well, so let's talk about that.
Well, EQ, emotional quotient, has a history starting with Daniel Goleman, and you can study it and you can get a PhD in it. But what I want to do, which I've tried to do throughout, is translate it into very simple language. And the simple language, again, in my book, is a guy whose name I don't remember, who was the head of a middle-sized, very successful biotech company. And it wasn't me who asked this, it was another researcher. And they were talking to him about hiring. And he said, well, we do have a secret. We only hire nice people. And he went on, and here's the part that I hope people will be kind enough to listen to carefully. He said, basically, to the interviewer, Evelyn, you and Tom Peters don't even understand what the names of the degrees mean relative to the people who are in R&D in biotech. But he said, I made this incredible discovery. Let's take the world's most obscure, sophisticated, incomprehensible degree. Hey, you know what I found out? There are a lot of people out there who have it, actually. Hire the nice ones. And so he interviews you, and you're the hottest of hot shits. And I'm interviewing now, I'm him, and I fall in love with you. And I got to have you. And we finish the interview, and what happens? Dear darling, godlike Phil talks to people, average, ordinary people in the company. He has 8 interviews. Mid-level person in the finance department, 26-year-old in the purchasing department, and indeed a research scientist somewhere else. And each of those people have the authority to say, nope, Phil ain't going to be in this company. He doesn't fit our mold. So the point is, it's obvious that we should do those things for my housekeeping department, but it's equally obvious, he tells us, when you're talking about a biotech firm. And, if people do buy my book or whatever they do, or, go look at it in the bookstore and tear a couple pages out of it, there's a wonderful thing that is a study that Google made of its top employees and its top teams. The top 8 traits of the top Google employees, and they use the term, were the soft things, not the hard things. Not STEM, but, does Tom listen to his peers? Can he accept ideas and modify things? Is he, a person you'd like to just be with a little bit? And I wish I had the list of the 7 out of 8 factors, and then they found the same damn thing was true with their most innovative teams. Google is one of those places, which I don't approve of, which has A teams and B teams. I mean, I don't like it because if I call you a B player, I have just done the most incredible job of demotivating to humankind. But they have A teams and B teams, and the B teams consistently out-innovate the A teams. And it's the same damn thing. Almost all of the top factors are soft. They are respectful of their fellow team member, and which is really important to the software company. The number one thing they found, the trait, was no bullying. And if you've got a Stanford PhD in computer science and an MIT PhD in computer science, and I'm really generalizing and being an awful human being here, the two of them both think they are the best trained, smartest human beings God ever put on the planet, and they probably aren't the world's best listeners. So it's things like that, and just one more. Now you're a neurosurgeon, and you're interviewing for a job at what mostly is the top medical group in the country, US, the Mayo Clinic. And a couple of people about 5 or so years ago wrote a lovely book called Management Lessons from the Mayo Clinic. But let's just take you're a neurosurgeon, and kind of like that interviewee in the biotech company, your record is, breathtaking. And so you and I have a 45-minute interview. I don't care whether you use an old ball pen and scratch it on your hand or whatever you do. During that 45 minutes, I am literally, not figuratively, counting the number of times you use the word we versus the number of times you use the word I. And as I said, Mayo comes out on top of every study, and this trait I've just talked about goes back over 100 years. It came from Dr. Mayo in 1914, and he called it team medicine. And in the big places in healthcare today, it's kind of the antithesis of that for a lot of reasons. But you look at the Mayo example, you look at the biotech example, you look at the Google example. These, and somebody wrote a book. Oh my God! Again, I really don't know the person's name, but you can find it if you look in my book, and you don't have to do that. You can find it a million ways. And the bottom line on the book was, he said, the most important activity in a company is hiring, and most people don't know what the hell they're doing. And I'm more than willing to buy that.
That's so interesting that hiring. I would agree. It's the most important thing, and it is hard.
Well, again, Phil, but look at it. You say that's a breakthrough idea for back to Mr. Belichick. What the hell is the most important thing that a football team does? Hire. And it's so obvious that yawn. But and again, why should it be different for my R&D lab and biotechnology or my housekeeping department?
Yeah.
We give it lip service.
Yeah, we do a lot of things lip service, Tom, and I think that's why you've been able to write 20 books about extreme humanism, right? About a guide to excellence. This one is absolutely beautiful. So, Tom, if you had like one more thing that you wanted to make sure that you got through to people, where they could get started on their path to excellence, on their path to extreme humanism, what would it be?
Well, I actually surprisingly haven't been asked that exact question, but here's my answer. David Brooks is a New York Times columnist, and a year or two ago, he wrote a column, and I've forgotten what the overall topic was, but he talked about resume virtues versus eulogy virtues. And a resume virtue is that you graduated with from MIT with a 4.0 average. You were promoted 7 times. You have a net worth of $63,284.27. And the eulogy virtues are obviously what they say about you at your funeral. And the eulogy virtues are all about the people stuff. And, my practical comment about that is, you're the head of a 14-person group, let's say, or you're even a single frontline employee. Phil, it's 5:00. What's your eulogy virtue score for the day? You're busier than hell, and yet Tom was having trouble with a project, and you gave him 30 minutes of help or 15 minutes with help. That's a eulogy virtue. And, one of the other ways, and I've alluded to this in the last couple of minutes, is in the days when I was using PowerPoint slides, I had a PowerPoint slide and it had a tombstone. And on the tombstone was $42,387,611.09. The net worth of the dead person on the day the stock market closed, the day they died, the stock market. Well, my obvious follow-up line, ain't never seen a tombstone like that. And, so something like the eulogy virtues and so on. And with all of this, and I hate to say it this way because I don't want to deflate what I've just been talking about, it's also the best way to make money in the long term. Maybe not quite tomorrow morning. And the evidence of that is so high you can't believe it. I just did, because I was trained as an engineer, I have to have equations. I did one in a book. I think I've got it in here too. And it's K equals R equals P. And what it stands for is kindness equals repeat business equals profit. So I think that's a good closing note, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kindness equals repeat business equals profit. That's a great quote, Tom. I'm not sure if you put it in this book, but I know that you've mentioned that before. But the book is beautiful. You and Nancy did a beautiful job putting together some great stuff here. Congratulations. Already #1. People are enjoying it. It's Tom Peters' Compact Guide to Excellence. if you don't know Tom, go to tompeters.com or follow him on Twitter. Always enjoy connecting with you, Tom. Thank you for your time and your insight, and congratulations on 20 books.
Well, thank you for that. And this has been a delightful conversation.
It always is, Tom.
Thanks it was great fun. That's all I can say. And hopefully
Fantastic.
it means a couple of things to a couple of people. But thanks
Absolutely.
for your time and your attention and your care.